Cool. Recording.
All right.
Hey,
Yay.
this is fun.
Yeah. Great. So Michael, what's your joy? What's your joy of getting to work with other people? I know you've worked with a lot of people in a lot of different regards and have a lot of studies that you've practiced in. And if someone were interested in working with you, how might you share, what you might have to offer to that person, depending on.
Well, the joy I feel is getting to participate in someone else's process and play a part in that when they start to light up, when their life takes off, when they're successful, that's what brings me the satisfaction in the work.
And that's going to be a really unique way of getting to that place of lighting someone up.
Yeah, because each person is completely unique. So how I work with one person could be very different than how I work with another person.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm working with you, then I'm tailoring what I do to your frames of reference, to your reality, to your world. And out of that, it's relevant to you. And so all the work, whenever I'm working with someone, is very context dependent.
Right. And how would you say you get to that place of understanding what one person needs, or understanding a person, or how they use words and language and understanding?
It's a blend. I would say it's left brain and right brain. So part of it is intuitive, part of it is just empathic. I can sense who I'm with when I'm able to connect deeply with the person. It's like I enter into their world through their frames of reference. And then also with tools like neurolinguistic programming, for places that I'm not clear, usually what I do is I look for the gaps when I'm with someone to understand what's going on. What is it that I'm not knowing? And from that place I can ask a question and really use the questioning and the inquiry process to get more information from the person.
Great. And would you just say that, what would be the most important role of the person who's showing up to work with you? Like, what would they need to say no for themselves, or,
Well, they just need to show up as themselves.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty is, there's a lot of coaches out there that are going to be more strategic and more goal-oriented in how they work with people. That's absolutely not how I work with people. Okay, so a lot of this is a spiritual process. It's a spiritual growth process for people, and I have to qualify when I use the word spiritual, because we conjure up a lot of different meanings of what that word means. So my use of the word is really looking at the inner development of the person, and are they on an inner growth process that is supporting their true reason for being here, their purpose for being born, who are the being they were born to be. Then the work becomes beginning to remove out the conditioning forces. What were we taught by our parents? What were we taught by our culture? What were we taught by our peers that may be valid, may be true, or may not be? So we really need to look at the whole assumption of our reality from the conditioned place to free up our natural, authentic. And then it becomes a matter of looking at our natural vibration, our natural frequency. And once we begin to move, it's kind of like the person sending out a radio signal. Each person is sending out a radio signal out into the world. And then there might be static on the station, and it's interfering, so people can't really get the clarity of their signal. And those are the conditioning forces to it. So the work is about removing the conditioning, removing the static, so that our signal, our clarity, our natural vibration, our natural essence, our natural soul, our natural way of being in the world is coming out. And people, when that happens, people respond to you very differently. If we're in relationship from a conditioned place, that's where a lot of the miscommunications occur, where the drama, where the interference can happen in our lives. So it's really getting to that clarity of transmission of who we are out into the world.
Awesome.
So that's kind of my understanding of spiritual. But it's also a lot of the surrender, a lot of the challenging our control on things, challenging our ego assumptions, challenging our that we're part of something greater. And it also means that there's limitations. So yes, we're unlimited beings in our divinity, and we're also in this human form. So if we are opting on one side of that versus the other, we're not having a complete picture. So we are unlimited and we're limited all in the same moment. And this gets into where paradox really comes into play, where we, when I talk about spirituality, it's really about opening the heart and beginning to challenge the mind from a paradoxical place, that we can't necessarily understand the language of the heart and the true state of expanded love, because it's greater than our minds can get around. Sometimes I use, like, if you had a snake trying to swallow a buffalo, it's going to have a really hard time getting around around that. So love is greater than our mental frameworks.
Would you say that understanding, belief or philosophy, is that like necessary, or is that common for the people who show up to work with you?
No, because that's my philosophy, but I'm not necessarily, and those might be helpful frames for someone, but the key is to work within your frame of, each person's frame of reference. So just because I understand something doesn't mean that it's relevant to another person's life. And this is where we want to have a deep respect and a deep rapport for the difference of people. So I can say, yeah, we want to raise our vibration and we want to operate in an open-hearted way, but that doesn't place a greater value on the person who does that. The person who is operating in a lower frequency, or they're still in that static noise, is no greater or lesser of value than the most enlightened guru on the planet. So we're all of equal value, and that's the deep respect and the rapport that we want to develop for difference, for the difference between us. And that's I think something that could be very useful in a larger sense on the planet too, with interreligious dialogues and religious tolerance and political differences and these things where we polarize and we fight instead of understanding that difference is part of what we need to accept and embrace.
Right, like you were saying with the paradox, and essentially people are going to show up with an intention, with a motive, a desire to go from wherever they may be in whatever regard to somewhere else. So it sounds like the willingness to show up and be open, and it sounds like a real gift you have to offer is to use your intuition and your framework of what your beliefs are, seeing someone in a really objective light, and also seeing them as just a human with a good intention, or an intention to bring themselves to where they want to be.
Yeah, when someone has an intention, that's part of their developmental path to follow that. Where people get a little stuck is they think, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to manifest and go on this path. But it starts from where they are. And if they have a strategy and a set of goals to get them to a certain place, the achievement of those goals doesn't necessarily they're going to be having a satisfying or fulfilling experience once they get there. So really it's about, from the place we are now, in the now, to have the experience that we think we're going to have at the end of the journey, and to bring that into the now, and to operate in our goals and our intentions from that place. And that's where the resonance and the law of attraction really takes a hold, because we're operating from a different frequency at that point. And so that sometimes we place a value on the future. When I get there, it's going to be a whole lot better than it is in the now. key is that it's actually the better is right now.
It's the only, right? And
Yeah.
it sounds like that's an offering, a gift you have to share, is to help people get really present with what's actually going on, what they're actually experiencing right now, and then how to take that into account and let that be the platform for which they're moving forward into what they want to become.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really dispelling.
When you say, and that reminds me of something, when you say being present in the now, because it's really about noticing what we're actually experiencing in any particular moment. The mind can tell a lot of stories, and the mind can actually distract us from what we're actually experiencing in the moment. So a lot of the work centers around tuning into the body and what the body is actually feeling, the sensations, the emotions, the subtle energy patterns that are going on in the body, and to begin to bring our attention to those as ways to clear and ways to get. The body is kind of holding the unconscious mind. So in the mind we have the conscious and the unconscious mind, and we're pretty much just like an iceberg. We're aware of what's above the surface. So that's what the conscious mind is, everything that we're aware of in ourselves. The unconscious is everything that we generally don't even accept or know about ourselves. Most other people can generally see it pretty easy, but we don't tend to see it in ourselves. And the body tends to hold and reflect that. So we can get access to a lot of the unconscious patterns. Why that's important is because I may have a conscious intention that says, I want to I want to have X, Y, and Z happen in my life. I want to make more money in my life. I want to have more social in my life. Whatever. I want to spend more time with my family. I want to, whatever the outcome might be. Okay. What happens is the unconscious is actually creating the counter intention. So I say I want this thing because, let's say I have stress in my life, and I say I want to be more relaxed. Okay, that's my conscious intention. The unconscious intention is actually that I want the stress in my life. And if we understand that the counter, then we can begin to go into the unconscious mind and say, okay, what part of me, what is it that's wanting to create the stress in my life? And maybe, without realizing it, that stress has even had some value. And when the value can be understood and respected and honored, then we can preserve the value in that unconscious intention and deconstruct the stress. So maybe the stress motivated me, right? That would be the value, that if I didn't stress, I wouldn't be motivated. I wouldn't do anything. Okay, so it's by understanding, saying, okay, well, can we find a conscious way to maintain the motivation so that you no longer need the stress strategy to get you to move? So that's just an example of how that conscious, unconscious, and we get access to that really quickly through the body.
And would you feel people are generally really receptive to, once something is illuminated like that, like stress is my motive to move me forward in the ways that I want, once that's brought to someone's attention, is there a way that, once that's brought up, a way of moving through that? Is there, to really be complete with that kind of programming or habit?
Yes and no. It depends on the individual. So some people are going to resist because they're not ready or willing to take the inner journey. Okay, and that's completely fine. We don't have a value judgment on that. It's neither right nor wrong, good nor bad. It's everyone is on their own timing, and it's an organic process. When someone is really ready to challenge that, the neurological pattern can be deconstructed, and that's where, and neuro-linguistic programming as a tool set comes in very useful. I like to use the term neuro-linguistic deprogramming rather than programming, to deconstruct the neurological patterns, the way our brain operates, the way our brain is actually creating, let's say, so in using this example of stress, how is the brain actually creating the stress? With neuro-linguistic programming, we can go in and find out how the brain is doing that and deconstruct the brain's ability to do that. When that's done, the person is left with their natural state of relaxation and feeling safe and secure in their body. Right? So, some practitioners of NLP might want to install a program. I don't really think that's necessary, because I think people are, then we're getting back into the mental realm again and just replacing one mental program for another, which is completely fine. But a lot of my work is starting to move towards getting beyond the mind, getting to the heart space, getting to where we're in a greater state of love and interconnectedness with each other. And again, that's a choice. It's not required for everyone. So someone may be working more in the emotional mental field of things, more like a therapeutic intervention. And that might be appropriate, and that might be enough for them. It just depends on the individual.
Mm-hmm. And so would you maybe clarify any more on that, the difference between, like you said, if you were bringing in a program and bringing someone to maybe a more emotional, mental field or space, versus leaving them in that, what I'm interpreting as more of a heart-centered, open, just being sense of and being relaxed. Yeah, would you, it sounded like part of your intention or offering would be to let someone just be in that state of natural beingness and relaxed, and then maybe allowing them to have whatever inspirations or motivations arise from that space, rather than bring in a predetermined program.
Yeah, I mean, because who am I to determine the program for someone else, right? And that's hubris and arrogance. If I did that, I don't think that would be appropriate. So I can guide and I can ask questions, but it's really from within the genius and the loving essence of the person. Their own soul knows the answer better than I do. I'm just here to help them access that.
Right, it sounds like you're an intuitive detective to navigate the unconscious realms and just let things be known. Let perhaps unconscious motivations be revealed, where people may not be consciously choosing the ways that their, say, unconscious mind or their habits or reactions are guiding their life, and be able to bring light to that, and then allow them just to come back to something that's perhaps more true or more in the center of who someone is.
Yeah.
Great.
So maybe we can take a little pause, because the light's starting to get funny here.
Great.